Hey everybody, welcome to the show today. We've got a great podcast with a great guest, Drew Chicone. He is a world-class fly tyer. He's written 17 books. Started out with one called Feather Brain, which is one of my favorite fly tying books. Drew has a wide amount of knowledge on all things fly tying and fishing, and we have a really good conversation.
But I think that is the main problem, is how the fly is moving, and I think that if you're going to count on the crab looking natural, then you have to really dial in sink rate and make sure it's not pinwheeling or doing anything like that.
We've got a couple of announcements to make before we get started on that. We have 3 segments for the Tom Rowland podcast. We have the How To Tuesday episode, which is the first one of the week. Then this is a Wednesday episode, a full-length episode. And then on Friday, we drop an episode called Physical Friday, which is intended to help us all to stay in good shape so we can hunt and fish and hike and backpack and ski and do everything that we want to do for as long as we can in our life. What we're going to do is we're going to start moving the Physical Friday episodes over to their own YouTube channel. Tom Rowland Podcast has a YouTube channel. You just search it out or look in the description of this podcast below, and you can get a link to that. It would be awesome if we could get a bunch of followers, subscribers on the YouTube channel. And the way that we're going to do this, eventually everything podcast is going to move over there, but it's not going to happen anytime fast. We're going to start with the Physical Friday and put that over there, and then we'll start moving some stuff that is not necessarily fishing related over there. And the last thing to go will probably be the How To Tuesday episodes that are very fishing focused and fishing related. But eventually, everything's going to move over to the Tom Rowland Podcast YouTube channel. So please go over there and subscribe on that. I also like to thank everybody that watches and listens to this podcast. It's been so fun to watch it grow and get bigger and bigger every week. It's been fantastic. Drew Chicone, he is a world-class fly tyer, like I told you before. 17 books and counting. Doesn't seem to be slowing down. He hosts trips. He is got a coaching role in doing these trips, and he's a really interesting guy. So here we go with Drew Chicone.
I'm Drew Chicone, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast.
Drew, what's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Good to be back on the show with you.
I know. I'm glad to have you. It looks like we got you right in your tie-in studio. Look at all that material behind you. That's awesome, man.
Floor to ceiling Tupperware containers. The key is numbering them for all you guys trying to organize your stuff, because you can put it all in containers, but then when you put them back, you never find it again. So you have to have like craft fur 14, eyeball 6, and then you start to remember it, and then you can do it with some sort of efficiency. But if you don't number it, it's a debacle.
Yeah. Well, how much fly tying stuff do you think you've accumulated over your career?
Well, when I started, I kind of took over from another commercial fly tyer. So I had his entire lifetime worth of stuff, and then a number of friends have passed and bequeathed me all of their collections. So I have way more than I would need, or my kids would ever need. So I don't know. When I check out of the game, somebody's going to get like a garbage, truckload of stuff. I
mean, man, I tied flies for a while. I still, dabble with it, but for a while I got pretty serious about it and was trying to, I'd go through Randall Kaufman's book or something like that, and I'd be like, I want to tie this one. So I'd go to the store and I'd get everything I needed for that, like a recipe that you go to the grocery store, and I'd get every little thing I needed. Well, you get way more than you need, right? And then you have all this stuff. And even with that, I have shelves of fly tying stuff. I can't imagine how much you have, probably way more than what we're looking at behind you.
Yeah, I mean, if I were to take my phone and just kind of pan through just feathers, I think it would probably blow your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds. Well, the other thing is, like when the manufacturers want you to tie with something and try it out. They send you like, hey, well, here's every color of
Right.
this new material. Okay. We only use tan and white, so I
Yeah.
don't know what the
And you use
the
like three strands of crystal
yeah.
flash or something like that, and you have all this
Yeah,
other
and then
stuff
you
sitting
cut it
there.
out of the fly when you're on the water, anyways. Because it's got to be the flash.
Yeah, that's
Got
what
to
it
be the
is.
flash. Yeah.
That's funny. What do you see has improved the most? I mean, of course, synthetic materials coming around, but like you mentioned, feathers, and I mean, they've have like chickens now bred specifically for hackles, and you
I
can have better and better and better hackles. What do you think has improved the most in the time that you've been tying?
Well, first, let me say feathers, I think, have gone the other way.
Oh, they
I
have.
think they're great for trout flies and stuff where you need to palmer, but for all the old, like tarpon style flies where you want that real thick quill or ricus, they've kind of genetically bred that out. So I have like
Hmm.
my coveted like father's capes, the chickens he killed in the garage kind of stuff, where the feathers are like really thick and they're awesome, but you can't find them like that anymore. Um, I think as far as stuff that's really come on, hooks are just incredible. Um, you got to be careful. They're so sharp, and it sounds crazy, but like my mentors would be like, "Oh, well, just grab a file and you take the old 34007, you hit it twice with this big, uh, foot long file, and that's how you keep them sharp." But like the Gamakatsus and stuff that I tie on, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many times you reach in the box too fast, just you're like, oh, on to the next one. You're like, oh,
Yeah, that was
underneath the fingernail.
one of the questions that I was asking people at the end of the podcast was what technology do you think has improved your fishing the most? And Richard Black was the first one to say that hook technology has improved. The sharpness of the hooks, and it is for people that have gotten started after chemically sharpened hooks, they don't remember. But man, I mean, like that 34007, that thing would be so dull coming out of the package.
Yeah,
You would never get a tarpon on it.
yeah.
And then you would have to sharpen it, and there was all these different styles of sharpening, either short and blunt or long and needle like, and
Yeah.
it
That was
just
it's whole other religion right there. It's just
yeah.
how you sharpen your hooks. So, I mean, for me, I still wear my belt buckle with the file on the inside. You kind of touch them up on the water, kind of stuff. But yeah, hooks for me, I think I would tell any tire the most critical thing you can do after your vise is a pair of scissors. If you really want to take your fly tying to the next level, go invest in the best pair of scissors you can afford, because that is the one thing that I can't do without is really good scissors.
Hmm. Do you like the offset scissors, or do you just have regular uh, scissors?
My favorite ones right now are these Umpqua the TMCs.
Yeah.
Um, these things are razor blades, but you got to be really careful because if they fall off your bench, they're donezo. Because magically, it's like they automatically hit point first. You drop bread off the counter, it always lands bread side down. Those either stick in your foot or they break the tip off, and they're one and done. So, um,
Do you
any of
hold
those,
you hold those in your hand when you're tying though, right?
I never put them down. They're
Yeah.
always on this
Yeah.
finger, and you get to the point where you're comfortable. And I keep telling myself you got to be careful because I'm always touching my face and doing stuff. And these are so sharp that you have to be acutely aware of your hands, like
Hmm.
what you're doing with your hands. You reach down to scratch the dog, it runs out crying. Like yeah, you
I had some that, when I ask about offset, that's what I meant is like you keep them around one finger, but then there was like a shorter handle you could put
oh
around
oh yeah
you could
yeah.
keep it in your hand all the time. And those really, really helped. I still have those things. I don't know who
They're
made them, but
trend. I think once you become real serious about tying, and especially production tying, the once you get in that habit of having them in your hands, everything gets faster. You realize you don't ever really use the scissors, like you're not in there doing
yeah.
micro trims. You're doing this. You're just kind of jabbing stuff, like cutting feathers off or thread or whatever. So a lot of times you just leave them kind of in your hand and partially open.
Yeah, that made my tying so much faster when I learned that trick of never putting the scissors down. Well, before we get going too much, we have this new section called the hot seat, and these questions are kind of either or, preference. You could pass if you don't
Okay.
like them, but it's not like a gotcha question. They're just kind of interesting questions, I think.
Politics.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, there's no political questions here except for the first two. Okay,
Okay.
here come the first two, and you could say they're political if you want, but
Okay.
East Coast or West Coast?
Ooh, East Coast.
East Coast or West Coast of Florida?
West Coast.
Early fishing memory or trip that made you a lifetime angler?
Early fishing memory.
Mm-hmm. Do you have one?
I do. Yep. Um, I'll try not to get, all misty-eyed or anything, but my grandfather was dying of brain cancer and hadn't spoke in about a year, and he was a game warden and an FBI agent, and he was kind of upstairs in bed, and I was the little guy that followed him around all the time, and I was down on the dock, and it was Easter, and I had tied my one of the first flies I ever came up with myself. It was, I don't know, it was like just a streamer, silver red tail chartreuse top, and everybody, the whole family was upstairs, and I was down on the dock messing around with it, and out of nowhere this giant landlocked salmon came up and just garbaged it. And I mean, it was literally, I was messing around off the dock making little roll casts, and I mean, the big landlocked salmon for Seneca Lake where I grew up was, like this off the dock. But this one was double that. And I landed it, ran upstairs to my grandmother, and I was like, look at this thing. And she was like, well, get in there and show your grandfather. And it's dripping blood all over, but she didn't care. And he sat up in bed. And granted, the man hadn't spoke. And he said, nice fish, Andy. And when I was little, like that's what they called me. And I was like, and everybody just kind of stood there agape. And after that, he didn't really speak anymore, but he came to, he acknowledged me. And like, it was one of those like,
Wow.
everybody. So for me, that was kind of the lightning rod. It was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to like create flies, and, fishing's my deal. But that was the moment where it was like you'd been struck by lightning. Like everybody just kind of stood there and like couldn't believe that he talked, let
Wow.
alone knew my name.
That's so cool. What a great story.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. Okay, so we'll get back onto the deal. I think I already know the answer to this one. Spinning rod, conventional or fly rod?
D, all the above. I love fly fishing, obviously, but I think people forget how much fun it is to go out back and put on a cork and sit on the dock with some kids and rip lips or flip plugs underneath bushes. I mean, I'm in for everything.
I love it. That's not the answer I thought. I thought it was fly for sure.
Ride or die, right?
Yeah.
But
Inshore or offshore?
I would, my knee jerk's inshore, but I'm really starting to get into it, and I'm working on a book for blue water flies now, and I'm trying to catch some pelagics, billfish and particularly on fly. So inshore with the hopes of becoming an offshore guy.
Yeah, I like it. Would you river, lake, or backcountry?
Backcountry, unequivocally.
Would you have a reptile as a pet?
No. I'm kind of like Indiana Jones.
Yeah, me too.
I'm not afraid of them. I just don't like them.
Yes. Coffee, tea, or energy drink?
Coffee, like 4 cups a day minimum.
Right on. Mountains or beaches for vacation?
Beaches.
Favorite fishing movie or TV show?
Spanish Fly.
Good
was
one.
like what I grew up with.
Winter Olympics or Summer Olympics?
Summer.
Going out on a limb here. Favorite pro wrestler of all time?
Ooh. Um, Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Ah, nice. Yeah, with the 2x4.
Yeah,
Love
that's
it.
it.
Yeah, that's old school right there. I was going out on a limb to see if you were really a wrestling fan, and you pulled out
I mean,
a real wrestler right there. That's pretty
it was
impressive.
tough because Jake the Snake
Also
was,
good.
and the British Bulldog.
Yes.
You know, I grew up in that era.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where we had the big rubber guys that you'd play with.
Sure. Yeah.
We call it the cassette era. We don't like to say old. We were from the cassette era.
Well, I was too. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise.
Country, classic rock, or rap?
Ooh, classic rock country. Classic country, Hank.
There you go. Okay. Best catch in your career? You probably already told us.
Fish wise, I mean, I was going to go with the standard wife.
There you go. I like it.
Covered all.
You never know. She might listen to this.
Yeah, that's it. Going to go with wife and then maybe Monster Snook or GT or something. I don't know. Permit.
What about GTs? Where have you caught those?
I went to Cosmolito.
Oh, nice.
That was a gift from a client that hurt himself and couldn't go. And it was one of those like, hey, I got something for you. You got like 7-8 weeks to get your stuff together and everything's paid for. And it was, my wife's like, you're going, you have to go.
That's so great.
Yeah, it was incredible.
That's so great. A movie that makes you laugh?
Great Outdoors.
Text or calls?
Calls.
Last book you remember reading or your favorite book?
I think I've officially written more books than I've read. So Land Remembered was the book about Florida.
So good.
That one I love.
I love that book. I listened to that on audio. And
me too.
It was incredible. I loved that book. Highly recommended for anybody that's
People
listening.
ask me all the time, what book are you reading? And I don't read books. I'm way too, I can't sit still. So like, even like when I walk the beach, like on like looking for snook, I always have an audio book going. So I do a couple audio books, you know, a month probably, just burning through them.
Yeah.
I'm reading one or listening to one right now that you would love. It's called Younger Next Year.
Okay.
It's about dudes, you know, like getting up there, and it's like when they retire and their brain kind of goes and their body blows out, and you know, it's all about what you do to push off disease and, you know, decay, and it's really interesting. Not that, you know, they talk about like, okay, you're 60 now, I'm 44, but like I figure it can't hurt to start early.
All right. There's another one by Peter Attia on that same kind of deal. A little more physical, but it's called Outlive.
Mm-hmm.
And there are, I don't know, there's a couple of chapters in there that are so technical that you could just fast forward through those and get to the next one if it starts to put you to sleep. But it's a really, really great book. And then I read another one that was, I have to remember what that one was. It was, I'll have to look through the book club. We have a book club here, but that one, Younger Next Year is not in it, but the Land Remembered is in it. So if you're looking for that book, you can go check it out.
The whole epigenesis of it is like, hey, really, as a species, we really haven't been like sitting in chairs that long.
Right.
I mean, we're plains animals, so you got to trick your body, you know, that you got to walk, you know, 5-10 miles a day. You got to have bursts where you're hunting, you know, and if you can do that, even if you walk 15,000 steps and do, you know, the gym a couple of days a week for some weights or some, you know, circuit training or some sprints here and there, you'll be fine. Eat whatever you want.
Yes, I believe it. Okay, so let's get back onto this. Okay, feathers and hair or synthetic materials for fly
Feathers
tying.
and hair.
You like that better?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very interesting.
Natural.
One of your favorite bands?
AC/DC.
Instagram or Twitter?
Instagram.
One thing you're afraid of?
Snakes.
Gamakatsu, TM co-owner, or Mustad?
Gamakatsu.
Office, Friends, or Parks and Rec?
Ooh. I don't think I've watched any of those,
Okay.
so I'm going to have to pass.
Okay. One piece of technology other than your phone that you rely heavily on?
My my AirPods or earphones.
Mm-hmm. Favorite fish?
Snook.
Android or iPhone?
iPhone.
Audio, paper, or Kindle?
Audio.
Yep. Chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Tying flies or writing books?
Tying flies.
And lastly, one piece of advice that served you well?
Every trip you miss is one you never get back.
I like it. Was that from your grandfather?
Yep,
Yeah.
that's what he told me. You better get out there and get every one you can.
He sounded like a real badass of an FBI agent and a game warden.
Yeah, he was, I think, the youngest FBI agent when in history when I was a kid. And I'm sure it's probably if you he was the sheriff of our town. You know, just hunting and fishing. That's all the man did. So all I wanted to do was be in his hip pocket. But he got sick real early, so I didn't get to do much of that with him. But my other grandfather did. So that's all I did was hunt and fish.
That's cool. And then the fly tying started early. What started you on the path of fly tying?
I found my parents' fly tying kit, this pistachio colored sewing box in the basement full of tinsel and herders things and, you know, all the stuff. And it was in the winter and I was bored kind of going through the picture books and everything that my parents had in this kind of like basement room that was just storage. And I found it in my mom's notes and I can, in this book, is what I found. And my parents got married at 19, and for something to do, they started taking fly tying classes. And I found my mom's notes on tying, and she had like little drawings and stuff.
Wow.
And that's what got me started. I just started messing around with it, and
what is that book? What
this Art Flicks. The Master Fly Tying.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I have that book.
What's really funny is it's signed Happy Birthday to my father in 1975.
Wow.
From my grandmother. So I mean it's kind of in the blood, you know. Everybody was doing the hunting fishing thing, and when it was too cold to do that, they were inside talking about it or tying flies. So
and
that's
where did you grow up?
In the Finger Lakes in upstate New York.
Okay.
Watkins Glen to be exact.
And what were the hunting opportunities? Deer and turkey and upland bird? Like what else would you hunt?
My favorite was September squirrel season. You know, when I was really little, I'd go sit in the woods with Grandpa Chicone, and he always hunted with the side-by-side double barrel, and once he let me pull both triggers, he got sick of me asking, and that was about it. But yeah, sitting in there, we'd go, you know, kick out rabbits or walk for grouse or sit in the tree stand. I did a lot of bow hunting when I was a kid because I could do it young. My dad was an archery instructor and a duck identification instructor, so we did a lot of. I think probably the most was ducks. We sat in the duck blinds on Seneca Lake and did a ton of that. That's probably my favorite.
Yeah, I'm getting ready to go duck hunting. Day after tomorrow, with my 85-year-old dad and my two boys.
That's so great.
Yeah, well, I've really researched this trip because I think my dad is a little. Well, he could still do it. He's in remarkably good shape for his age, but I wanted to kind of avoid the waders and the water and the little John boats, and you know your typical duck hunting scenario. And I didn't know if that was possible. And I started to ask around and talk to one of my friends who's also going to go on this trip. And he was like, "Oh man, we go to Canada and it's dry fields up there." And
Hmm.
I'm like, "Well, what do you wear? Like, you had a, like, what do you wear waders?" And he's like, "No, you could walk out there in
White.
what you're wearing." And I was like, "That's perfect. How do I do this trip?" And he said, "Well, we're going this certain week, and there's probably room at the lodge." And so I jumped on it last year and booked this about 9 or 10 months ago, probably. And it's coming. I'm going to be packing my stuff today, this afternoon.
Oh man.
But that duck hunting up there is supposed to be amazing. We're going to be north of Calgary, north of, around the Edmonton area, and duck and goose. And my boys are in Montana, so they're just going to drive up there. It's quite a difficult place to get to, by airplane. It's going to take my dad and I 2 days to get there.
You kind of get ruined though. I'm going to tell you.
I'm sure.
When
Listen,
we
that's
went
what
to,
I'm trying to do for my dad. I want to ruin him on this
that's
one.
it.
Maybe he won't even need to go
That's
again.
that's it. The memory is galvanized into his psyche. Just there forever.
Right. Well, he certainly galvanized plenty of memories into my psyche with duck hunts throughout my childhood, and it's his favorite type of hunting. He's never been a deer hunter or any sort of big game hunting. He loves hunting birds. He loves ducks. Are, in my opinion, that would be his favorite. I would actually have to ask him, but he likes dove hunting. He likes pheasant hunting. He likes any kind of you know, pigeon hunting. We went down to Bolivia and did that one time. He likes all that kind of stuff, and he's been all over the place hunting birds. But I think duck hunting is his favorite. So this is a real special trip for us, and I'm really looking forward to it. To have 3 generations up there
It's the
doing that.
camaraderie, right? Like, I mean, you can go sit in a deer blind, or you just don't get the interaction and talking. Oh, here they come, get the
Yes,
coffee, that kind of stuff. It's the whole experience, where you can just be together with your family. I can't tell you how many times, like, we schedule our trip back to New York around when duck season is, because
hmm
my wife loves the duck hunt, and my daughter will get in the blind if you give her a couple of donuts. I mean, you have to. There's no iPad, but there's donuts.
right. Hey, donuts
So
are awesome. Hot chocolate and donuts.
that's it.
I
That
mean,
that
that
is the
is
currency.
it's worth it. I mean, that's how I well, actually, I that's how I learned how to drink black coffee is in a duck blind because
Me
my
too.
dad brought, his crappy old thermos that would literally stay warm for about 3 minutes. And in
The
a cold
green
a cup,
Stanley.
yeah, the green Stanley, exactly. And
That's
it
it.
was so I mean, I don't think there was any insulation in the thing at all. I mean,
No.
maybe if it was in the truck, it would keep it warm, but to today's standards, it didn't keep anything very very warm, and so he just had just that one. It's not like we had two of them; we had one of them, and he put black coffee from the Waffle House in there that we stopped. We stopped and ate at the Waffle House usually, and if I was cold or I wanted something, that's what I got. The
Here's your hand warmer.
Yes,
The
exactly.
coffee in that tin cup
Yeah.
for a lid,
And I was like,
and
Dad, I see everybody else putting like sugar and milk in there. Like, do we have any of that? And he's like, no.
nope.
I mean, that's it. You either drink that or nothing. And so today, I mean, I enjoy drinking black coffee. Like I
I
always have. I've never put anything in it.
That's the only way I drink it. And I'll tell you, when I got and not to sound like a shameless ad, but when I got my Yeti, I burnt the hell out of myself
Yeah.
because I was so used to it not being hot. I mean, I put the Pyrex in the microwave and hit it for like 4 minutes, so it was like nuclear when you put it in that thing. And then by the time 9 o'clock, 8:30 came, you had your first cup of coffee, it was drinkable.
Yes.
You do that in one of those Yetis, and the roof of your mouth is gone for the next 3
I
weeks.
know. That is the worst, burning your mouth. I burn my mouth on a what was that I ate? Oh, it was oatmeal. It was at iCast, and
Hmm.
I ordered oatmeal, and it looked like when the oatmeal came and it sat down at the table, there was no steam coming off of it at all because it had like formed like a little skin over the top. And I was like, this has been sitting up there waiting for the rest of our food to be cooked for a while, and I just took a big bite and put it right in my
Hey,
mouth,
man.
and I burnt my mouth so bad, and it was weeks before it was better. Like, and I'd learned my lesson. That and French onion soup, I've learned my lesson on that too. That
That's like
hot cheese,
napalm.
yes. I mean, and also I went to a particular steakhouse where they like to brag about 1,500-degree plates, and they do have
Hmm.
great steaks. But I got that steak. They're like, the plate's very hot, sir. I'm like, yes, I know. And I took the broccoli and I just dipped it in some of the steak sauce and popped it in my mouth, and I burnt my mouth so bad on that, so
Yeah.
bad. I don't like that. I don't like burning my mouth. I don't
Yeah. You.
usually have like super hot things. Like, I'll pour my coffee and I'll let it cool down a little bit before I even drink it. I don't know why. I guess that goes back to the duck blind again, because I learned how to drink black cold coffee, and it turns out that apparently that's what I
I
like.
freeze the coffee in ice cube trays, and I cool down my coffee with coffee.
Oh, you are a true pro.
Well, you get to the point where you have to drink a lot of coffee. Like, I am a coffee super freak. So, if you're going to put like three or four in one mug, like I
Yes.
use like the Nespresso machine or whatever, because I just, otherwise, I'm really the only one that drinks coffee. So, if you make a whole pot, then you're just throwing it away.
Yeah.
So I ended up to the point where I would make a pot and then put it in ice cube trays. And now sometimes I'll just freeze a couple like flavored Nespresso ones or whatever and use them for that. If
Huh.
you could cook with it or whatever, but it works great if you want to make iced
Interesting.
coffee or cool
Yeah.
something down.
So, have you ever had Black Rifle coffee?
I have not.
Oh, we
I've
gotta
heard a
get you.
lot
We
about
gotta
it.
get you some Black Rifle coffee. It's the best. I love it.
Yeah,
They have a
I'd
whole
love to
bunch of
try.
different kinds, but my favorite is like I just like the a light roast. My favorite's the gunship, which is that's my new favorite. It was just
Yeah.
black. They have one that's called just black, and
Yep.
there's nothing fancy about it. It's just good black coffee. But then, like, my coffee journey has gone more and more into, I guess, coffee snobbery, somebody would say, or like
You're a
I'm
connoisseur
well,
now.
kinda. I can taste the difference between good coffee and bad coffee. And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I do enjoy good, fresh coffee, and I like it in
But
different ways. I've learned how to brew it differently from just the straight up machine, like the coffee, auto drip coffee machine. And then I got a French press, and I was like,
yep,
well,
yep.
this actually tastes different. Like, it's the same coffee, it tastes different. And then I learned about how you grind it up a little bit differently, and that made it taste a little different.
Oh yeah.
I got kind of very interested that you could take exactly the same coffee, you could brew it here, and it was marginally okay, or you could brew it here, and it was the best cup of coffee that you had ever had in your life. And then I got into the pour over, which I think that's the
Yep.
best. That's
Once you start going down that rabbit hole, you're like, well, I like this roast a little bit better.
yeah.
You go, you're I would say at the gourmand stage, and the next stage for you is straight connoisseur.
Well, I don't
Like,
know if I'm gonna get there, because I'm not like, it's not like I won't drink bad coffee. I still drink plenty of bad coffee. You go to the
oh
Waffle
yeah,
House or something like that, I'm happy to drink that coffee. But what I like about the pour over is that the whole thing revolves around a scale, and there is this accuracy to where you grind up the same amount of coffee, 42 grams, and then you put the same amount of water in there, 600 grams. So that's like I think that's like a 17-to-1 ratio or something like that.
Mhm.
I watched the Black Rifle Coffee video on YouTube, and that's what they said to do. And so I was like, 42 grams and 600. That's easy to remember. And so I make exactly the same cup of coffee every day, because there's nothing worse than like making even when you do it on your machine, you don't measure it out exactly right, and you're like, today's kind of weak, or too strong, or I don't know, but I can make the same cup of coffee every time. It's like you're
do
fly
you
tying.
do you journal?
I go on and off of the journaling.
I have been journaling focaccia recipe for the last 6 months. I've probably made it 40 times, and I keep doing micro adjustments. The temperature of the water, the different types of honey. The what type of rosemary I finish it with. Is it sea salt or molten salt on top? Like I got it to the point where it's like 2 stones on the bottom, 475, 26 minutes, pull it 1 minute on the stone, and it comes out. You got to eat it within the first 2 hours.
Wow.
Because it's still crispy. And I mean, baking is, I don't know. It's just it's one addiction from the next. Like, fly tying or cooking, baking takes it to that like scientific level you're talking about.
Where does that come from with you and your personality of like that kind of perfection or attention to detail? And obviously you have this whole part of your life where it's exactly the same on your fly tying. I wonder where that comes from. Have you ever thought about that? Like
some neuroses or defect, like ultra type A quest for perfection. I don't know, but I mean, everything is like, if I care about it, it's like, it's that old adage, anything worth doing is worth overdoing. I just keep doing it to the point where it's like mastered, and then I get like bored with it.
Yeah.
And when I was, in sports, like, I was a tennis pro, and I, played tennis for, got to the point where I was like, you did it in college, did it in high school, and then you just kind of burn out, like, okay, I don't want to play tennis anymore. But like, I don't know, fly tying is more art. So no matter how good you are at it, you can always be like, how do you get salmon flies? Crap. It's just,
see, that's why you should have picked up pickleball. Like, that's the next level.
Everyone keeps telling me, like, hey, if you played tennis, now that you're over 40, you should move to pickleball. So my wife's actually been leaning on me about trying it and going to play with her or something.
Oh, you're gonna have so much fun, because you're gonna immediately be better than all these other people who are just getting into pickleball, don't have a tennis background, or I think even racquetball is a very it crosses over. I was never a good tennis player, but I was a pretty decent racquetball player, and I do see that there's a good amount of crossover between the racquetball, because a lot of times you're picking up the pickleball very low to the ground, and then there's a lot of wrist involved in it, where you're trying to catch one going out of bounds, and you flick the wrist, and the racket's shorter. There's a lot of, there's no ceiling though, so typically that's where my racquetball is not an advantage in pickleball, when you're like ceiling shot and it just goes right over the fence.
Home run derby.
But you would like pickleball, because you'll get out there with some people that think they're pretty good, and you'll have a substantial tennis background, and you will literally beat them, whatever pickle point is to 0 every time.
I can't wait to try something different.
Well, it's fun. What about what about the thought that once you become good at something, you could become good at anything? Like, do you see that with your fly tying and for your tennis and other things? Like, is there a process that you have? Like, if you're going to take on this blue water fly tying or whatever, are you going to think about, well, if I can master snook flies, then I can master offshore flies, or if I can master tennis, I could master pickleball?
I would say, with anything where it's like muscle memory, I'm pretty good. If something like you don't have the passion for, like, hey, I need you to start taking over the books and doing accounting. Doesn't matter how many spreadsheets, you know what I mean? Like, it's not going to happen. So if I want to do something, I think it's that, repetitive, like I want to be the best at this, or I want to get better at it. You just keep going and keep going until you're happy with the level you're at. I think, for me, that's how I am. I remember, kind of like the reason I got into tennis is because my brother and his older friend wouldn't let me play because I wasn't good enough, and I was hitting them out of the fence. So I would just go get my yellow Sony Sports Walkman, and go over to the high school and just hit tennis balls against the big bus barn wall, and I did that for hours and just got to the point, took some lessons. And then, by the time I was a senior, it was like, okay, who's taking a whooping now? I was just handing them out, but that it was more like I wanted to do that, So if you want to be good at something, you'll find a way. You'll just keep doing it until, you're the level you want to be.
Yeah. What about writing a book? Like you seem like you've been on a lot of different types of journeys on your fly tying book writing. And how many books have you written now?
Uh, 17, I think.
17 books. So you're a
Yeah.
seasoned expert in this. And how I'd be interested to know, like, you know, on the first one, like when you look back on the first one, was that like you were lucky to, with what you know now, were you lucky to have gotten that thing published, or did you go on the right path right away?
I was lucky to get an opportunity. Um, in the industry where everybody would cut off a finger to work in hunting or fishing, there's a lot of competition, and I was lucky that fly tying wasn't exactly the sexiest of sports. There wasn't a whole lot of guys doing it, and it was one of those like, okay, there's these five guys, and when they're dead, fly tying's gone forever. Like at the time, that's what it felt like to me. So I got an opportunity to take a crack at like Jay Nichols said, hey, I think that came from John at Fly Tire. They were or Fly Fishing Magazine. That was my first one. I wrote an article and they said, could you do more of these? And Jay said, well, if you can show me 6, then we'll make you an offer for like a book contract. And that was probably the most painful thing I ever did, was writing that first book, because I was not a writer at all. And, one of my mentors said, writing's like lifting weights. You're not going to bench press 300 the first day. You got to start building up and doing a little bit every day. And the best thing you can do is start a newsletter. Give yourself some accountability. So write a newsletter every month, even if you only have 5 people reading it. And, one's your father, and your brother or whatever. Just put it out there. Give yourself accountability. So I started the Salty Fly Tying Chronicle 135 months ago or something, and I haven't missed one yet. But it's each month is a how-to that's free on a fly, and that is why it became so easy for me, because I do one every month, and after 10 months you got a book. So I just randomly do them, and as I find people I want to interview, or fly patterns that people are really interested in learning to tie, that there's no step-by-steps out there. People are like, oh, how do we do the Bowers crab, or how do you do this or that, stuff that was never really published. So I hunted it down and wrote it up, and then it became a chapter in a book. You flesh it out a little bit more. And so that was my model for writing books. But the first one, I didn't have that model. It was like, okay, from scratch, write a book. And oh my God, it was like pulling teeth. I remember, I thought I was done, and then I sent it over to Jay, and he was like, okay, so here's my notes. These are all things that are like need to be rewritten, or these are, every one of your 900 pictures needs a caption. You're just like, like I can't keep going. What will it take to make this end? And I vowed never to write another book after Featherbrain.
Wow.
Like, nope, never going to do another one. It was too laborious. It took forever. But I don't know. I guess you forget, it wears off, and you go back in.
What was the second book?
I think I self-published Snook Flies. That was the second one I did, and I did that through Amazon, through KDP. And then I did like redfish flies and a couple of the more species specific, because everyone was like, okay, Featherbrain was really cool. It was kind of like the roadmap for designing your own patterns, and you had some weird stuff in there like dyeing feathers with Kool-Aid, and why UV works. But like it was more like, okay, I need a handful of really good redfish patterns or snook patterns or bonefish patterns for, maybe it's Texas or Andros or Abaco, and you just got to the point where you started to drill down and say, okay, these are where people are going. This is the information they're all asking for. It's pretty easy. You got the roadmap right in front of you.
Yeah. That's interesting. I would think that almost when I ask you that question about what's the best piece of advice you've ever or or that has served you well, that that newsletter piece seems like pretty good advice.
Oh yeah, that was up there. I worked as a consultant for several years after I shut down the mortgage and title business. Um, so I worked for a supply chain logistics consultant that was, I mean, he was a super niche guy, lived on Sanibel, and just an incredible writer. And he did a newsletter, and he had like a master class and all these things, a like a study group, and he created these, getaways where people would come have like a share group. So I learned a lot of those techniques from him, and he, was really, adamant that I write all the time, just keep writing, because that's really going to help. And he also had me, I started journaling. It wasn't really because he had me, but I journaled words that I would hear like on these conference calls with like, the CEO of Heinz or Campbell's or Sara Levy. I mean, these are powerful business guys, and they would be dropping knowledge, and I'd be like, oh, what does mellifluous mean? Or what is, so I had this book or this journal of words that I would look up after the calls and then write down what they were. And, I can't tell you how many pages, it could be its own book now, of words that I've written down that, or sayings that I thought were funny or catchy or things I liked, but I've kept that kind of log, and that really helped me increase my vocabulary. And every time I'm writing, if I need like a fancy $15 word, I'm like, let me just see what I got here.
That's funny, because like when you hear that and you hear people talk, like that, and they're talking pretty quickly, it's funny how like if you write that word down and then you go and you don't know what it is, you kind of get the gist of the conversation, like what they're saying. But when you go and actually look up the definition of that word, you're like, oh, this whole conversation takes on a slightly different meaning than I thought. You know what I'm saying? Like it's funny with that. And once I would imagine that once you became really in tune with that, to where you're writing, you're actually looking for those words that you don't understand the meaning of exactly, right? And then the conversation takes on slightly different meaning.
And you find that you really don't need to say as much if the words you use are correct. I mean, you can use a couple of really well used words that drive a point home. And for like if you're in a group of educated people, it really kind of makes everybody stand back, like, okay, what's what am I dealing with? That guy just used
Do you have an example?
I remember being in line with him, and he was like this really kind guy, but like we were late for a meeting, and we were at Starbucks, and he was getting coffee, and they were just kind of jerking him around, like laughing and throwing stuff around. And like, he's like, no, could we get this going? Like, I got to go. And then finally he just lost his temper. And he was like, if we could get some ambulatory people around here, I was like, ambulatory? I'll put that in the old log. Instead of like, I don't know. I think a well-used word has a lot more weight to it, than swearing,
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, some comedians like Brian Regan, I love that guy, and he's got some interesting thoughts on cussing. He never cusses, never swears, ever. And he just said, I just think it's lazy. I just think it's easy to get that quick, easy laugh with that, and I choose not to do that. And so, like, when I don't know who was the first comedian to swear a lot, whoever it was,
George Carlin.
Yeah, probably. In that time frame,
Richard
Pryor. So that was like his thing, right? So
yeah,
that was a unique thing. But now it's like, okay, well, now everybody does it, and you get that quick laugh. And Brian Regan's like, well, my thing is to not do that. I'm going to figure out a way to get the laugh without doing that. And if he ever decided, I mean, one day Brian Regan's just going to drop it, right? Like, and it'll be hilarious, because he's like trying.
I laugh because I'm that way with tattoos. I don't have any tattoos. People always ask. I'm like, you get tattoos to be unique. I'm the only guy that's unique now.
Well, I know,
I'm
me
the
too. Me too. But
like
people ask me like, why don't you have any tattoos? And I'm like, dude, I can't.
every.
I don't have. I can't. I don't have a favorite T-shirt for more than 2 weeks.
Uh,
I have a T-shirt and I wear it, and I'm like, oh, this is my favorite. This little thing means so much to me. Like it's some kind of saying or word or whatever, and it's like that really means. And then a month later, I'm like, I don't know, moved on. So
Remember the Dr. Seuss book
yeah,
where like I don't know we get a star and then there's two
I
stars
do
and like
remember
I
that.
just can't remember the name of that, but I always that's what I always think about when I think about like getting tatted up because numerous times I've said, oh, I'll go get a tattoo. My brother, we were gonna get something funny and it was always like divine intervention. Like I got food poisoning the night before we went and I was in the hospital and it was like, nope.
I guess I'm
I'm
not
not
getting a
supposed to
tattoo.
get one. Yeah.
My dad always told all of the grandchildren that he would get a tattoo if they ever wanted to get one, that he would go get one with them. And I guess there was like some psychology in there. Like I don't really want to take my grandfather to get a tattoo,
Yeah.
but he did this, and so my son was like, "Granddad, I'm gonna go get a tattoo, and I want you to come with me." And he backpedaled. He backpedaled hard. And I don't know that it was so good because my son was like, all the for 19 years or 20 years he's been telling me he's going to get a tattoo, and I finally take him up on it,
You
and
called his
he
bluff.
called his bluff, man, and he was like, no, I'm not getting a tattoo. So that one, I don't know that one went as
Yeah.
well as he hoped, but I don't know. Tattoos are fine. I just can't
I,
decide
I'm a,
on
I don't. Yeah.
anything. I can't decide on anything that, and I look at T-shirts as a great example because just like I said, I'll have a favorite T-shirt and then not anymore. I won't wear it
I'm
anymore.
I'm a sales guy. If there's nothing I have that like I want the new one. So I'll sell that off, and I figure if I get a tattoo, I'd be like, now I need a different one.
Right.
Like, but then
Well, I think
I
that's how it
run
goes, and the next
I
thing you
run
know,
out of
you got a
space.
whole tuxedo like David
It's
Lee Roth.
yeah, I just run out of room.
Yeah.
So
Well, I got
I
plenty. I got plenty to work with here. I
yeah,
haven't. I don't have one yet, so I may not get
we're in
one.
the same
Or
boat rowing.
or you just go all in like a summer vacation. You come back and you're like, check it out,
Yeah.
totally covered.
We had a friend in Arizona, and he was a straight laced dude, and you'd never in a million years know it. And you'd always wear like a black T-shirt, ever. And he came over for a pool party one time, and he took his shirt off, and his entire back from like. I mean, with his hairline to his belt buckle was this Poseidon scene, and it was like him pointing the trident and the fish coming out of the water, and I was like, oh, I
Wow.
just had no idea. Like, how many thousands of hours? I mean, the color was amazing,
Yeah.
the artwork and detail. But he was like, "Yeah, so I only have one tattoo."
Yeah.
you
It's
know?
it's across my whole back and down my
Yes.
legs.
Yeah.
I learned that about. I listened to David Lee Roth on Joe Rogan, and I've never seen David Lee Roth with any tattoos ever. In all the Van Halen days and everything,
Yeah.
you don't see any tattoos. But apparently, he has what he calls a tuxedo, which is, I guess, that's a term for being completely covered from your ankle to your collarbone down to your wrist, but nothing. If you were wearing a regular shirt, you don't see it nowhere, and he is completely covered from head to toe.
You still hear me?
Yeah, did I lose you for a
Okay.
second? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, anyway, he's completely covered from head to toe, and that's called a tuxedo. Um, I didn't know that. So we're almost about to run out of time here. It's been awesome, good conversation so far. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the future of fly tying, and especially with something that I'm very interested in with permit flies, and just kind of wonder what your thoughts are. I mean, we've had some minor improvements with like strong arm flies and some more realistic type things, and I see some guys tying some ultra realistic crabs, and those are good, and they'll definitely eat them. Bonefish really like them, but with permit specifically, and you've written a good bit about permit flies. What do you Why do you think the flies don't work very well?
I think I think it's more with presentation and sync rate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that most people get excited and they try to move a crab in a way that a crab doesn't move. And that's why I fish the majority of times a shrimp. Um, I I like a really big spawning ish shrimp. Something that if the fish isn't reacting the way I want it to, I can impart the fly with a different movement short of falling to the bottom. If you start stripping or popping or doing anything like that with a conventional Merkin style fly, typically you get an indignant refusal and the middle fin and they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think whether it's a topwater shrimp, which I've seen a lot of that happening too, where guys are fishing a gurgler style, or like a strong arm gurgler, or even like the floating. I don't know if I have any here. Something like this, which I call a Gulf Coast drifter, which is it's just a foam top versus the contraband style, which is more of a Belize style crab.
Yeah.
But a lot of guys are just fishing the claw with a little feather.
Right.
But I think that is the main problem, is how the fly is moving. And I think that if you're going to count on the crab looking natural, then you have to really dial in sync rate and make sure it's not pinwheeling or doing anything like that. And then it comes down to lead time. So if you're not a next level caster, you're going to have a lot of problems, because you need to put the fly where the fish is going to be if you're counting on sync rate. It's like soccer. You don't pass to the person, you pass to where the spot they're running to. And that's how I think about it. If it's on a ray, or if there's a couple in a group, working, it's not like they're just hanging out, right? Like if the ray's still, they might be still, but for the most part, they're moving, right? So if you can put the fly in front of them and say, okay, that fish is in 8 feet of water, and I need to pick it up around 4 feet, then how far in front do I have to cast, and what fly should I be using? So there's a lot of intangibles there, and moving parts. So for me, it's like, okay, I'm going to fish a shrimp, which I know sinks pretty consistently at this rate. With this style lead eye or whatever, and I can pop it along, and I get a lot better reaction to that movement than just waiting.
Have you what's your permit record these days?
As far as landed,
yeah,
and count, one I'm counting.
Okay.
I have come unbuttoned on numerous ones at the boat. I have several leader touches, which I don't count in permit fishing. I had one in Mexico that was about the size of this Yeti, which I'm not counting. But my big one was caught on a Merkin. Oh no, two. I caught one in Belize last year. Like a 12-pounder, and I hooked another one there. So I don't know. It's one of those, like, the game goes on forever and the party never ends. So for me, it's like, okay, what am I getting reactions to? A lot of it is user error. You're breaking them off or coming unbuttoned or whatever. But, like, are they following that fly? Are they eating it? Are they rushing it? And for me, I've got it dialed into I don't know if I have any here. It's my favorite is a Bailey's no-name shrimp with modified with hot orange eyes and a little hot orange spot. And I think that orange gets their attention, and it's big enough where you can cast it with pinpoint accuracy. It's not like it does the, trash can lid where, depending on the wind, it could be 6 feet to the right or 6 feet to the left.
Sure.
And and I can also throw a much longer leader with a shrimp fly than I can with a big non-aerodynamic crab.
Yeah.
So I go out to 14 feet on my leader. My bite's usually 15 or 12. Sometimes it's 20 if I'm in like the Bahamas where those fish are just like dinosaurs. But I think a lot of it is kind of getting the rest of it dialed in and not just the fly.
Yeah.
For
sure.
Counterintuitive.
I one of my favorite things in the world to do. I mean, I love fly fishing, and for a long time, that's all I did. But then I discovered spinning rods and live crabs. And after, 10 years of going out there and having, maybe my best year, I remember when Brett Favre was a really good quarterback. He threw 52 touchdown passes one year. And I was like, that seems like a good thing. Like, that's one a week. So, and I had a lot of people coming to fly fish for permit. And not every week, because then we would have a significant period of time where all we're doing is tarpon fishing. But for the rest of the year, we're basically permit fishing. And I thought, well, 52 seems like a real stretch goal, but it seems kind of attainable. Like, could you catch one a week or average one a week? So many weeks you'd have to catch multiple fish, and then your clients would catch multiple fish. And this is all on fly. And I did get there, 52 permit in a year, and I was very happy with that. Very happy with that. I was really, really happy. And there's some days where you catch 3, some days you catch 1, but a lot of days you're starting to catch them. And it was almost entirely when the fly would drop to the bottom, throw the fly in there close enough to where the fish can see it, let it drop to the bottom, and do not move it. That was my strategy, right? And it was like the fly looked good on the way down, but then when you start stripping it, it didn't look good anymore, right? Like what you're saying, or it would catch grass, or something would happen, and it wouldn't look good. And I've certainly had people strip it and the fish tails up on it and then goes and gets it, and you see them actually chase down the fly. But that's very rare. And I've also seen people that I used to try to lead them, let it fall to the bottom, let the fish get up there, and then just move it a little bit. And that usually results in an atomic explosion. They seem to hate that, right?
Yeah.
But they would pick it up dead off the bottom, right? But you had the cast. What you're saying is the cast had to be right there, perfect. It had to be so close that they would kind of look up and they'd see this thing go into the bottom, like the crab had seen them, and they're shooting down to the bottom to get out of the way. And then if you ever watch a crab, like snorkel and put a crab in the water, they will go down and then they'll put their claws up and they'll just sit there, right? They'll rely on camouflage and they'll sit there, and maybe they move very, very slowly, but that was my strategy. And just let them see it, but you couldn't cast too close because you'd spook them, but you needed to cast close enough to where maybe they look up and they see it out of the corner of their eye. They're like, I'm going for that. And they go over there and they eat it. But what I really like to do, even more than all of that, is throw crabs, like live crabs on spinning rods.
Mm-hmm.
And man, you can catch 52 in no time.
Yeah,
and
bait works great.
It works so well, and so I kind of I really like it because, first of all, I spent so many years trying to catch so few of these fish, and then I got to where I felt like I was pretty good at it, but still, it's so few fish compared to any other style of fishing that we're doing. I mean, catching 52 a year sounds amazing, but it's really one a week. If you caught one bonefish a week, that would be terrible. If you caught one tarpon a week, that would be terrible. If you caught one redfish a week, oh my gosh, that would be horrible. With any style of tackle, right?
And you live in the Keys, right? So
yeah,
you're
the best place.
Yeah, and you're fishing for them all the time. Right. And what you got to remember, and what I have to keep as top of mind is, most of my clients, I'm not a guide. I'm a host and I take people places and I coach. So most people, it's like jumping off the deep end. They go from trout to permit, and you could have the best day on the water ever, but if they don't catch one, it's a bad day, right? So
Yes.
like I really hate permit fishing compared to everything else because it's just I would say I spend my time on perfecting flies, and I spend most of my time fishing for bonefish if I'm in the Bahamas with clients, or snook and redfish here. I don't baby tarpon, but I don't do a lot of big tarpon. I don't do a lot of permit fishing in the Keys, almost never. And it's one of those things where it's just it takes a special kind of person to devote themselves into something that difficult. The guys that are like ride or die that only permit fish, but they live in Montana, and you know what I mean, like when they're
Yeah.
saltwater, that's a special breed of human.
I mean, I guess, or it's like, like Del Brown. Del Brown had done it all, man. I mean, he had caught plenty of tarpon. I mean, he's fishing with
Yeah.
Steve Huff. He's had plenty of opportunities. He basically, had enough of tarpon fishing, had enough of bone fishing, and
Yep.
now it's like, okay, well, here's this challenge of no one's catching these fish. So if we even caught a couple, like let's pioneer this sport, and we've happened to
Absolutely.
tie this fly that seems to be working a little bit, and they pioneered the whole sport, which is very interesting to me. That's super cool. I love that. But the type of person that got into permit fishing when I started guiding was a guy that had already done all the rest of it. Right.
Yeah.
And
It
then
was
you
the
started
last
getting
frontier.
to get these other guys that not only are they going from trout fishing in Montana to permit, but they also have zero experience with any saltwater species whatsoever, which on the one hand is incredibly difficult, but on the other hand, it's like, well, just hit them in the head with the fly and don't do anything else. Well, they can do that if they get that real simple instruction of just hit them in the head and let it fall, and that's it. Don't worry
It's
about
kind
anything
of
else.
like dogs smell fear. I swear, if a guy gets on and has no idea what a permit is, doesn't even care,
Yeah,
and you're like, just hit the fish in the head, and they do it, and they catch one first day, like, no big deal,
yeah,
and it's for everybody else that has like that permit like shake, and then when the ray comes, you're like, okay, this one's over 35 pounds. This is you know what I mean? Like
right,
they can't even cast. They get
right.
up on the front of the boat, and they're like, they're just a
But
hot
I
mess.
do believe that there is something that's going on there with that, where and it can happen with tarpon too. It can happen with anything, but
Yeah.
you're so nervous that first of all, that's the opposite of a flow state. In a flow state, you just flow. You just make the cast. Like maybe you've been in Cosmolito all week long. How nervous were you to catch a bonefish on the last day? Right?
Yeah.
It's so smooth. Everything is smooth. You couldn't miss any. There's no way you're going to miss. You caught 200 of them already, right? Like 201 is going to be like backhanded behind the back over the shoulder. Oh, I got him. Oh, he came off. No big deal. Like I now I'll catch this one over here with my left hand. And you're just like, okay, well,
The,
try that, on your first day in the Bahamas, and you're never going to be able to do it because, I don't know why, but once you get in that flow state, that's great. But that's the opposite of the flow state, the knees knocking, the being so nervous. But what I was trying to get to is that I spend a lot of time throwing crabs. I prefer to throw crabs now than to fly fish for them. And one of the reasons why is because I like to see them eat. And I like to see, with a crab, it's not like you just throw it out there and they just eat it. You have to put it in the right place. You can scare the hell out of them with a crab, and you can also place a crab in a place where they don't see it and they don't want anything to do with it. Your crab can die, and you throw it over there and they don't want anything to do with it. And that's what I think. I think all of our crab flies look like dead crabs. And
yeah.
most people that are fly fishing for them, I think, don't have very much experience with throwing a live crab or throwing a dead crab. It's not easy. You have to be very good with a spinning rod. And once you are very good with a spinning rod, you can be super dangerous. you can catch 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 in a day. But man, if
I
your
think
crabs die, you're
you hit
catching
the nail on
0
the
in a day.
head with the dead crab, and I have hundreds of pictures and dozens of videos of crabs where I just study crabs. I watch crabs in the water. How do they look like upside down? Because the fish is going to be looking at them from the bottom. Or what do their legs do? Why their swim fins always have little checkers on them? Like all these little subtle nuances and characteristics or details that make a difference. And I think the thing, even when a crab is still, it's still moving. There's
clicking.
little mouth parts going, or little.
Yes.
I videoed these crabs in Belize floating on mangrove leaves, and it was the most interesting thing. They always had like one leg going to
Yes.
steer, and
Yes.
they're like, one. So like I started going to thinner and thinner rubber legs and keep them short so they're like vibrating, right? Like there's always some sort of movement happening. And for the mouth parts, a lot of times I use rabbit fur now, because that stuff gets on you when you're tying flies, and it never goes away. And when it's in the water, it's always doing that little same thing, undulating. So I think you've nailed it. The more research you can do and time you spend with the actual thing you're trying to emulate, the better you're going to be. Your flies are going to get better. Your castings and your placement's going to get better. Just understanding the organism that you're trying to represent with fur and feathers.
Yeah. I thought at one point, I was like, man, if we could put like a little piece of Alka-Seltzer in here too, like on the bottom of the thing to where bubbles, because crabs are putting off bubbles too, like a lot
It's
of
out
bubbles.
there. There's dudes in Louisiana doing that for redfish too.
Really? With Alka-Seltzer?
Yeah,
See,
and they bubble.
That's where you have a great idea 20 years ago, and you're like, who wants it? That's probably cheating. Like, I don't know. It's not cheating though. It's like that's I don't know. We're just trying to. It's not like you're gonna do that and then all of a sudden say that you're like the best permit fisherman in the world now. It's like, no, man, we're trying to get better at this. Like, and that's where I leaned into the bait fishing. It's like I'm trying to get better at fly fishing. And so I'm going to do more and more and more bait fishing, so I see more and more and more of these fish eat, and more of their natural behavior, and more of them eating something the way that they would eat a normal thing. And you get to do that with bonefish all the time. But permit is just a funny fish like that it's. I just think that fly fishing for them is so ineffective, and people would be like, what? We're way better than you were back then. Okay, well, sure, but you still don't catch very many compared to bone fishing, or compared to red fishing, or compared to, Jack Crevalle fishing, or even tarpon fishing. Like, you catch more. The flies just represent what they're eating, and it just works better, right? And
don't get me wrong. I checked it off. Like I got a 34-pounder in Bahamas, which was like the holy grail for me. And I got a nice 12 to 15-pounder. We didn't weigh it, a pretty fish in Belize this year. And, I'll still permit fish, but given the opportunity, I'd rather bonefish. I'd rather duck hunt over deer hunt because of the camaraderie. I want to be walking shoulder to shoulder. Hey, Tom, look at this one, or here they come.
It's so fun.
It's like a team sport, like walking fields for pheasants, or you're with your buddies.
But as an angler guide team permit fishing, there's a lot of that you really need to be like in sync, and that's the key, having a guide and you guys working in tandem. Yeah. One of the things about that little fly that you showed me, the reason why I don't use a lot of those little ultra realistic flies is because I think most tires the hooks are way too small. And when I think about getting a 35-pound permit on one of those things, and the body of the crab, I'm not saying exactly the one that you're talking about, but there's a lot of crabs. It started out with the Mick crab, right? It was like it was like an epoxy body and deer hair back, and there was almost zero hook gap.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to risk it on that. Like,
I can't tell you how many manufacturers I've worked with on that. And Gamakatsu actually kind of cracked the code with their they make Yeah, wide gap hooks, and they also make a 3H, which is like 3 times the wire. So as you drop down into the smaller hook sizes, the wire isn't so insignificant that they can crush it.
Right.
And Mike Hennessy out of Hawaii got me started on those for bonefish, because he was throwing like 12s and, just itty bitty 8s, 10s, and the bonefish or regulars, like 34007 style Hennessy hook, if you went down to like an 8, the wire was too small. So if you catch a 10, 12-pound bone, there's no way you're keeping it on.
Right.
And they crush it. So you're exactly right. These really short shank, wide gap hooks that allow you to put something on the inside and still have plenty of effectiveness of the gap.
Yeah.
That's like the SL12 S, and those super wide short shanks are all I use on crabs.
Yeah. Interesting. Man, this has been really great. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know you had some stuff going on, but that last little part about the permit flies, that's what I kind of wanted to talk about. And it's really, really interesting to see where,
I enjoyed the coffee talk too.
Yeah, no, man, it was great. We'll have you on again. I got to get you some Black Rifle coffee. Somehow I'll get some over to you. And
sounds great.
You can try that out.
I'm afraid I'm going to be hooked on that stuff. Those guys, they send it to me every week.
Oh, there's a coffee club. You can join that. You get it every month. Hey, tell people how they join your newsletter, how they find your books. Like how do people find you?
You got it. Instagram, Dr. Chicone is probably the most up to date if you're looking for new content. My website, saltyflytying.com, has all my books and newsletters and all the fly tying materials and things like that. But you can always email me, Drew at Salty Fly Tying, if you have questions, or DM me on Instagram. That's probably the fastest.
Awesome. And you got hosted trips going too?
Always trying to put together. I got a little company called Lux Cadre, and it's more than just hunting and fishing. It's the food too for us old folks. So they're into the fancy schmancy cocktails and high-end food, and so I try to put together experiences that are the whole thing. So bring your wife, your family, whatever. We do family trips, couples trips, dudes trips.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, I do.
You got a website for that?
I don't. I'm trying to keep that real small. What I found is, it's friends of friends. It's by I would say referral only at this point. But if you have questions or you want to go somewhere, email me. That's one cool thing about being in this business is you get some great connections and you know what time and where to be when. So I get to go to some pretty cool places and eat some delicious food and hunt and fish some great stuff.
That sounds awesome. All right, Drew, man, awesome conversation. Thanks for being on and helping us out with a bunch of fly tying information. And
you got it.
That'll be
always
it
a pleasure.
All right, thanks, Drew. We'll see you later.